Chair, Councillor Kevin Robinson.
Please be seated.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are all very, very welcome. The theme of this year's commemoration, as you probably know, is ordinary people. We are all ordinary people, whatever our place in life, but it is our circumstances which turn us into the extraordinary. It can be anything, from prowess in sport, thought, artistry, and sometimes it's extreme events and circumstances. History shows us all of this all the time. Through the ages, ordinary people have risen to become extraordinary by their actions and reactions, and their compassion, or indeed their venality. So through history we see amazing acts of compassion and care, but we also see the horrendous behaviour of man on man. And it has no boundary in terms of country, race or creed. We all have the capacity for good and evil. The Holocaust is the most extreme event of all, which exposed unbelievable evil and exactly what man is capable of. And to most of us, it is incomprehensible. How was it allowed to happen? Well, it's the age-old phrase, all it takes for evil to flourish is for a few good men to do nothing. What we need to be are the good men and women who speak out, influence and act where we can. You are going to hear and see today stories that are beyond belief, and you have to comprehend that these things happened to ordinary people. But they were not ordinary people, were they? They were extraordinary. They were heroes, and thank you all today for coming to commemorate. I will now light the Holocaust candle, which in 2015 there were 70 candles designed by Sir Anish Kapoor. They were distributed around the UK to commemorate then the 70 years of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau on the 27th of January 1945. We are lighting this candle again today in memory of that occasion. I will now call upon the Mayor's Chaplain, Father Clive Hillman, to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, you hold all of our days in your hands. On this day we come before you to remember the victims of the Holocaust. We lament the loss of the 6 million Jews who were killed in the Holocaust. We lament the millions of other victims of Nazi persecution. We lament the victims of other genocides. May our minds be clear and attentive to their memory, and our hearts be moved to bear witness to their lives. Today, help us to remember and recognize the sanctity of each human life, that all people are made in your image. One day, we pray, that genocide and hatred will be no more, and that love will triumph over evil. In our prayers, in our actions, help us to show this love in the world today. Amen.
Thank you, Father Clive. I am now pleased to introduce to you Rabbi Warren Elf from the Southend District Reformed Synagogue to reflect upon the theme this year of ordinary people.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of Parliament, members of you? I suppose we're all ordinary people. We know that the Holocaust was started in some ways by the vision of a man we understand to be an evil man out of the ordinary. But he had lots of followers, and maybe not all of them were ordinary, but many of them were ordinary. Many of the Nazis started life as ordinary people, even if they saw that label as taking them out of the ordinary. And whether it's the Holocaust of the Nazis or other genocides that have happened since then, even if it's particular leaders who started off, the crimes couldn't be perpetuated without the involvement of ordinary people. Ordinary people were the perpetrators. Ordinary people were the victims. Ordinary people were the bystanders who chose not to get involved, chose not to do anything. Ordinary people were also those who tried to stand out from the crowd, to do something, to save those who were being victimized, to hide them, to send them to safety. Of course, we're all ordinary people, and we all have important choices to make at different times. The term genocide wasn't coined until 1944 by Raphael Lemkin, a mixture of a Latin word and a Greek word. And we hoped in 1945 that there would never be any more occurrences of such hatred and horror. But we've seen too often, and still going on in our world today, episodes where the hatred has gone unchallenged, where organization has been allowed to take place to frame that hatred into legal restrictions and persecution and murder, and ultimately to more genocide. We as ordinary people in an ordinary world have a responsibility to speak out, to act, to encourage our politicians to act if we don't have the power to do so. We're going to be honoured today to hear the words of extraordinary, ordinary people, both Janine and Evelyn, in terms of what they experienced. But let's remember that we all have a responsibility to do everything we can to eliminate hatred, to speak up against hatred and persecution and injustice, to do everything we can to make our world a fairer, a more equal and a better place. Thank you for sharing this afternoon with all of us.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Elf. I'm now going to pass to Rabbi Hyman from the South End and West End Hebrew congregation to introduce our principal speaker, Mrs. Janine Webber, BEN. Thank you.
Worshipful Mayor, councillors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak today as Rabbi of the South End and West End Hebrew congregation. We are truly grateful to the City Council, South End, for arranging today's Holocaust Memorial event. My remit today is to introduce our distinguished guest speaker, Janine Webber, BEM. Persecution of the Jews is nearly as ancient as civilization. Currently, our scriptural readings on the Sabbath have been from the book of Exodus, featuring Pharaoh's enslavement of the Jewish people in the land of Egypt. After the 10 plagues and multiple negotiations between Pharaoh and Moses, the Jews are set free and leave Egypt on their journey to the promised land of Canaan. In order that this story is preserved by future generations, God commands Moses to establish the festival of Pesach, Passover. In doing so, he incorporates a commandment that on the night of the festival of Pesach, together with various rituals, the story of the enslavement in Egypt and the Exodus will be told to all present, so that the memory will be preserved for all generations. For 3,500 years, we have committed ourselves to celebrate the Passover with the retelling of that story. In a similar vein, it has become incumbent upon us to hear and to tell the story of the horrific Holocaust, the systematic persecution and annihilation by the Nazis of 6 million Jewish people, men, women, and children, together with other minorities who were annihilated. We are honored and privileged today to hear Janine's story of her miraculous survival in Cairo. Janine was only 9 years old when the Nazis invaded Lvov, which was a wonderful Jewish town. Janine only started to tell her story some 18 years ago. She sadly suffered in silence for most of her life. But in those 18 years, Janine has spoken at numerous venues across the country and used all types of media to spread her story and her message to all mankind. In 2015, Debs Patterson created a short film called Boots, based on Janine's lifelong nightmares about Nazi boots. I urge you to watch that after the events here today on YouTube. And only a few days ago, Janine featured on Channel 4 News with her message that we must be kinder to refugees. Janine is a 90-year-old grandma, a Buba, who has a self-confessed tough cookie, not surprising. She loves socializing and regularly goes to the opera. She walks for 1.5 hours daily and regrets how the pandemic put a stop to her workouts in the gym. We are exceedingly honored to be in your presence today. And now we will hear the story. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this lovely introduction. Well, I suppose I don't need to say anything else. You've said it all. Yes, I was born in eastern Poland, in a town called Lvov. It was Poland in 1932 when I was born. So you've heard I am just over 90. And I feel very young. So don't tell me that I'm old. Lvov, which is now Lviv, is Ukraine now. But I will show you now some photos. First of all, a map of Poland as it was before the war, for 1939, when the war started. And Lvov is a very beautiful town. Here are couple of slides. There are photos which I took when I went to Lvov with my late husband about 12, 13 years ago. In Lvov, before the war, there were 3 communities, almost equally divided. There was the Polish Catholic community, Ukrainian community, also Christians, but Orthodox Christians, and there was the Jewish community. And there were over 150,000 Jews who lived in Lvov. Most of them, unfortunately, perished, shot mainly, or died of starvation or hunger or disease. And later, they were deported to camps which were in eastern Poland. There was a camp as well in Lvov Janowski. Now I will show you some photos of my family, and this is the first one. I think we are somewhere in a little village on holiday. My mother is lying on the grass wearing a swimming costume, so I think we are most likely by a river. There is no river in Lvov. And my uncle, her brother, is lying on a deck chair. I don't know why he is wearing pajamas. Seems very odd. Behind him is my auntie. She was the youngest sister, my mother's sister. She was about 14. I will mention her again because she played a very important part in my life. She was about 14 on that photo. And there are 3 sweet girls. One of them, it's me. I'm sure you can guess. Generally, surprisingly, people guess. Sometimes, just to have a little laughter, I ask them if I'm still so sweet. It's me in the middle. And I always smile on photos. I think I must have been a very happy child. The baby in the front is my cousin Nina. She was about 10 months old. And she and her parents and her brother, they lived in the same building. They had a flat on the first floor. We had a flat, a very modest flat, 1 bedroom, 1 little room, which we used as a dining room and a kitchen on the 2nd floor. And the other girl is just the daughter of some friends. My uncle got married about a year or so later. He had a child and a wife, and they were killed. And this is my father. You see, they were very elegant, always wore a hat and carried this stick. It was supposed to be smart. And this is the photo which I like very much. My mother holding my brother's hand. He's about 2, and I'm holding on to her, and I'm about 4. And you know, I remember this dress my mother used to wear. It was yellow, very pale yellow. And as a small child, I always thought that my mother was very beautiful and very elegant. But I think most of small children think so of their mother. In 1939, Germany and Russia, the Soviet Union as it was called, had an agreement, and they divided Poland into 2. Western Poland became German, Eastern Poland, where we lived, became Russian, and the Russians came to our town. My life under the Russians didn't change really very much, except I was sent to school because I was 7. And in Poland, children start school when they're 7. But I was very much aware that my parents were very, sort of always whispering. And I asked my mother, what is going on? And my mother said the Russians are sending to Siberia people with money and property. And of course, they didn't want to be sent to Siberia. As you know, it's one of the coldest places on our planet. Well, we were not sent to Siberia because we didn't have a lot of money. And the little flat where we lived, I don't even know if it belonged to us or if it was rented. After the war, I regretted that we were not sent away because 50% of the people who were sent to Siberia survived the cold weather. But my parents did not survive the German occupation. In 1941, the Germans forgot about the war and they started moving eastwards, as you see on this map, to occupy Russia. And they came to our town. No sooner when they arrived, and I'm going to tell you something about which I feel quite bad. The Ukrainian who didn't like the Jews started persecuting them, and in fact they killed 4,000 Jews even before the Germans started killing them. And if they saw a young woman who looked in the streets, who looked vaguely Jewish, they would force her to get undressed. In this photo, the mother is trying to protect her daughter. In this photo, you see, they kicked an old man. They knew he was Jewish because he had a beard. In those days, the Poles, Ukrainians, and Germans didn't have a beard, and the religious Jews had. So they kicked him, he fell to the ground, and they are laughing. On my right, the German officer, next to him, the Ukrainian soldier, and they're all laughing. You know, some Ukrainians collaborated with the Germans, and they, in fact, joined the German army, the Wehrmacht. Very soon, the Nazis, the Germans, started rounding up the Jewish men. And one day when I was in our flat with my mother and my brother, I heard on our staircase the Germans, the Gestapo. I don't know if you've heard that name. The Gestapo was the German police, armed police, in charge of really hunting down, persecuting and killing and shooting the Jews. I heard them screaming. My father came running in and he sent the Germans after me, and my mother locked the door, and my father, in order to escape, jumped from our second floor balcony onto the first floor balcony, and he hid under the balcony. The Gestapo started banging at our door. My mother had to let them in. They didn't find my father, and they left. When they left, I asked my mother, why do they want my father? And my mother said, it's because we are Jewish. You know, I never thought of myself who I was. I used to play in the streets with other children as we did in those days. And seeing these armed, who looked to me like soldiers, I became very frightened. Very soon, we were told to leave our flat, to take a minimum, a suitcase. And we were given a small room in the house for my parents and my brother and me. My grandmother, who used to take care of me because both my parents worked, she came and she slept in the corridor. My cousin Nina, whom you saw in the first photo as a baby. She was about 5 now. She too, she and her parents and her brother, they too were thrown out of their flat because they wanted to take over all the Jewish possessions and properties. Very soon, my auntie came to see us. Now, let me just say a few words about her. My auntie was the 10th child to my grandmother. And my grandmother was always ill, so nobody really took care of her very much, and she became a bit of a rebel. She rejected all the traditions, and in 1941, she was 17. She got herself a boyfriend. Now, in those days, a girl of 17 didn't have a boyfriend, especially in a very sort of traditional Jewish family, and everybody was very shocked. But her boyfriend, who was Jewish, spoke German, and he had a contact among the German soldiers who would warn him if there was going to be a raid. And so after a few days, when we were there, my auntie came and she said, when you hear the Gestapo approaching, hide. So my parents dug a hole under the wardrobe, which was in our room. And when we heard the Gestapo coming, my mother, my brother and I, we hid in that hole. But there was no room for my father and my grandmother. My cousin Nina and her mother, they hid in the wardrobe in their room. Her father and her brother, who was about 12, they hid in the attic of that little house. The Gestapo found them hiding in the loft. I don't know what they did to my grandmother. I remember hearing her screaming. Maybe they threw her down the ladder. They were very cruel. They took them away. They didn't find us hiding in the hole, and they didn't find my cousin. And when it was quiet, we came out, and very soon I asked my mother, what happened to my father and my grandmother? And my mother said, the Gestapo shot them. You see, they were shooting the Jews. They only started deporting them because the German soldiers find it difficult to shoot children, and just to help them, they created the gas chambers, and the camp in Lvov as well. Most of the Jews were shot. So, again, my auntie came one day, and she said, they're coming, and this time, when we heard the Gestapo, we hid in the kennels, which was in the courtyard. There was my mother, I was sitting next to her and holding on to her, my brother was holding on, and my cousin Nina and her mother were there. And you know, I remember I was looking through the wooden slats, and I could see the Gestapo approaching. And I was so frightened that I didn't look at their faces. I just looked at their boots. They always had these shiny black boots. And for years, I used to have a nightmare that the boots were coming to get me. They didn't find us, and they left, and I will tell you that now I don't have this nightmare anymore. Very soon we were told to move to the ghetto because at last it was ready. You know, most of the towns in Poland had a ghetto, usually an area of a town surrounded by a fence or a wall, but they would force all the Jews to go where the conditions became atrocious. I will tell you a little more about it. We were given a little room for my mother, my brother, and myself. My mother wasn't well, and you know it was very, very dangerous to be ill in the ghetto, because what was happening, so many people were dying. There were children, corpses lying on the pavement of dead children. People were begging, and so it was dangerous what they were doing. Occasionally they would come with a cart and pick up the corpses, and if they knew that somebody was ill, they would pick them up and just throw them on top of the corpses, even if they were still alive. And that's what happened to Nina's mother. She got typhus. As you know, typhus is a disease of poverty, of lack of hygiene. A lot of people died of typhus. It can be cured if one has medication, but nobody had any. So she became ill, and they found her. They threw her on top of the corpses. She was still alive. My cousin Nina was there. She saw it. So when my mother became ill, my uncle, her brother, whom you saw in the first photo, you remember, my uncle carried her into the cellar of the house in order to protect her. I went down the cellar to see her. My mother was lying on this iron bed. She looked at the distance. She didn't look at me. She didn't speak to me. And I couldn't understand why, because my mother had always been very loving. And I became so upset and so frightened by this situation that I ran out. I went to see my uncle. My uncle told me my mother had died. So I was left with my brother. My auntie said to me, try and get out of the ghetto, because they're rounding up people. I noticed that somebody has dug a hole under the fence, which was around the ghetto. So one morning, my brother and I, we crawled through the hole into the area where there were no Jews. It was safe. We walked all day, but we didn't know where to go and who to speak to. So in the evening, we decided to go back to the ghetto. When we approached the fence, there was a group of Polish children, and they said to us, give us your coats, if not, we will call the Germans. We gave them our coats, and you know, it was winter. In winter, in eastern Poland, can be very bad. There's no comparison with our winter here. We gave them our coats, and they let us crawl back into the ghetto. Now, let me tell you a few more details about the ghetto. This is the first photo. You see, people at the beginning were quite well dressed. You see, there is a German soldier outside with a rifle. If they were alone, they wouldn't go into the ghetto. They would go only if there was a group of them to shoot people or take them away. They were hanging people and leaving them for days and forcing us to go and look at them, to create terror. People were begging. You see how this little girl, she is hoping somebody will give her a piece of bread. You see this woman, she's her feet are wrapped in newspapers. This little boy, you see how thin he is. So the conditions were awful. there was so many people were sick and dying, and always we had to think, where do we hide if we hear the Gestapo approaching and taking away? My uncle knew quite a lot of Polish farmers, and he found a family, Catholic farmers. He found a family to hide my auntie and me, and also a family to hide Nina, my cousin, and my brother. He paid everyone. We were hiding in the stables when one morning the farmer came and he started grabbing my aunt, touching her, and I didn't understand what was going on. I could see she was very frightened, and she begged him to let her go, and he continued, and I didn't know anything about sexual harassment. I was just 9, and in those days children at 9 didn't really were very, very innocent. So suddenly my auntie got up and she ran out of the stables, and I was left with the farmer. They locked me in a room. There was a bed in a bucket. I was lying there. They would bring me some food occasionally, but I was getting very hungry, very cold one day, and I said to them, "Can you bring me something to cover myself with?" They brought me an old man's coat, and I noticed that this coat was infected with crawling head lice. This might sound horrible to you, but I kept killing them. And I think having something to do saved my mind, because if you lie there, there was nowhere to sit and nobody to talk to. And I remember I started seeing animals in the walls. When you lie there, week after week, month after month, you can lose your sanity. After about maybe 2 or 3 months, they told me I had to go. So I left. I found my way into the ghetto and found my uncle. And my uncle found another family to hide my brother and hide me. One morning, the daughter of the family, who was about 20, she came with a German soldier, with an armed soldier, or with an SS, as they used to be called, very cruel. And I knew she brought him to kill my brother and to kill me, because by then I knew they were killing all the Jews, including the children. For some reason, which I cannot explain, he didn't want to kill me. And they killed my brother. He was now 7, he was just 7. And they told me to start walking. And I thought he was going to shoot me, but he just didn't. So I walked for hours, and after a few hours I became hungry. I saw a woman in the fields, and I asked her if she would give me a piece of bread. She wanted to know who I was. I knew. My aunt had told me never to tell anyone that I was Jewish, so I invented a story. It wasn't too difficult. As I told you, the Ukrainians didn't like the Jews, but they didn't get on well with the Poles. And I believe they killed some of them. So I told this lady that I come from a Catholic family and they were killed by the Ukrainians. She believed me, and she said I can come and help her in the house. She was very kind, but after a few months she said she learned that I was Jewish and it was too dangerous to hide a Jew. And it was dangerous. She would have been shot immediately. So she bought me a train ticket and I went back to Lvov. I had just got back. I had with me the name and address of a young Polish Catholic man called Edek, or Edek, you would say in English. Edek was 19. He was a night watchman of a convent. When the war started, he said to my family, if you ever need some help, try and find me. So I found him. I told him who I was. He got up and told me to follow him at a distance. And I'm not surprised he didn't want me to be too close, because he most likely thought I looked Jewish. It's very dangerous to show help, to give help to Jews. So he took me to a small building, put a ladder against the wall, and told me to climb this ladder. When I opened the door to the loft, I saw my auntie, my uncle, my auntie's boyfriend, 13 Jews. Edek was hiding 13 Jews, and I was the 14th. He is a hero. He risked his life. He would have been shot immediately had they found out. At night, they would go down, they dug a hole under the stables floor, and one night we all went down that hole. It was fairly well organized. There were 6 planks and chairs and a bucket and a bowl hanging from the ceiling late day and night. We would have to take it in turn to lie on the plank or sit on the chair, and there was no room for walking. You know, it's very hot living on the ground, and I remember just wearing my underwear. There was very little food. My auntie would go out at night and buy some food the following night and come back the following night. So I remember eating slices of dry bread with chopped up raw onions, and I thought it was delicious. I still like it, by the way. And so I stayed there for nearly a year. After about a year, my auntie and my uncle said, it's too difficult for a child to live in a hole. And one night, we got out of the hole. My auntie managed to get some false papers, and I became Polish Catholic. My name was Janina Kopierska, very nice Polish name. My auntie took me to the Polish committee was formed to help the Poles. The woman who saw me, she said to my aunt, this girl looks Jewish. And you know, I'm not surprised. I could hardly move my legs. I was dragging them because I hadn't used my leg muscles for a year. And I was also very thin, and I don't know how my face looked. Living for a year without fresh air or daylight. But nobody suspected my aunt because she was blonde. And you know, in Poland, people believed that all the Jews were dark. But in my family, quite a few were blonde. And also she was a very strong woman, very articulate. She convinced her that I wasn't Jewish, so she gave me a letter and I went to a convent. They took me in for the night. The next morning, the woman in charge, the Mother Superior, came and she said, we cannot keep you here because you are most likely very ill and we don't want other people to catch your disease. And so she bought me a bus ticket and I went to Krakow. I found an orphanage and run by nuns. They were very kind, but you know, Catholic nuns pray several times a day, and I didn't know the Catholic prayers. So I would just move my lips to pretend. I was always frightened that she might find out. And also, I could hardly walk. So I asked the Mother Superior, how is it that other people can run and I can hardly walk? And she said to me, And you know, I still remember, she said to me, you have to accept that you will never walk properly. Well, fortunately, she was wrong and I would walk up. So I wasn't very happy. So one day when an elderly priest arrived, he said he had a little house in a garden and he could take 4 girls. I asked him if he would take me. And indeed, I would sit in his garden, walk around the bushes, and little by little I recovered the use of my leg muscles. He was a very kind man, but what I wasn't happy about, we slept in bunk beds. I slept in a low bed. The girl on top used to wet her bed, and I was always worried that it might run on me, but I never wanted to complain because he was so kind, and also he looked to be so old. So one day when an elderly couple arrived, they said they would like a girl to help them in the house. I asked them if they would take me, and that is how, at 11 and a half, I became a maid. I worked for them. They hired me out to work for another family. Of course, they didn't know I was Jewish. They thought I was a Catholic. And so they sent me to church. And you know, the Catholic children have to undergo communion. So this is my photo in my communion dress. What worried me though, before you do communion, you have to go to confession. And I didn't know what sin I had committed. So I didn't know what to say. Anyway, he did. I think he liked me because I was very good at the catechism. And he then allowed me to do the communion. When I arrived in that village, I wrote to Edek. Nobody replied, and I thought everybody was dead. But 6 months after the war, my auntie came, and here she is on my right. This is about 30 years ago. And she took me to Krakow. She put me in a children's home for Jewish children who survived, like I did, either hiding or false papers, where I met my cousin Nina. But you know, after the war, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland. And we lived in a winter resort called Zakopane. People knowing that we were all Jewish, they were throwing stones at us. And also people who survived, who very few of them, actually less than 2% of the Jewish population in Poland survived. And people who wanted to go back to the houses of that. Unfortunately, the Poles killed them, and this is well documented. And there's been a film recently, about 3 or 4 years ago, made by a Polish man, which shows that a Polish Catholic killed a family, a Jewish family, to get their house. So the people in charge decided to leave Poland, and that's us in a coach. We went to Paris. When we arrived in Paris, my auntie said to my cousin Nina and to me, what do you want to do? They want to take the children to Israel. Do you want to go to Israel, or do you want to go stay in Paris? Because she wanted to go to the French university, to La Sorbonne. We both said we wanted to be where she was. Of course, my aunt was still young. She didn't have any money. She put us in a children's home for French children, French Jewish children, because you know France too was occupied by Germany, and a lot of Jews were killed. I went to school. I learned French very quickly. Within 2 months, I spoke French. My education is French. My language is French and English. When I was 24, I decided to come to England just for 3 months to improve my English. And I met an Englishman, and you guessed the rest. I have 2 sons and 2 grandsons, and I love them very much. I try to teach my sons to be tolerant, to be kind to people who are different, who perhaps have a different color of the skin or different religion, and to be kind to immigrants as well, and stand up to persecution and prejudice. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I find that there are no words. Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Tom, Alicia and Felix, students from Belfast Academy, to share the work that they've been doing in their studies of the Holocaust.
I'm Alicia. I'm at sixth form at Belfast. At Belfast Academy, the Holocaust is understood to be the exemplification of the extent society can stoop to, with the persecution of minorities in the most inhumane way possible. We also recognise how quickly that occurred for a group of people to be treated in such a way, which is greatly concerning for us as young students. It is therefore crucial to have an insight and teach our peers in a multitude of ways, whether from a historical perspective or a philosophical perspective. Every student, no matter their preferences and subject, needs to be aware of what the antithesis of human behaviour is. Especially since, in a 2018 study, it was found that 38% of the population of Europe don't know what the Holocaust is, or its everlasting effects. This is unacceptable, especially as our main goal should be to enlighten the minds of young people so we can ensure a future where this never happens again. Therefore, as an academy, we need to be aware of the Holocaust and remember everyone who endured these trials at the hands of immorality, not just as victims, but as real people who were alive before the Holocaust and could have had so much more. From whatever standpoint, this generation needs to study this tragic event in order for society to learn from it and other genocides that have occurred. The Holocaust still retains a great amount of relevancy today because there is an overwhelming amount of anti-Semitism still prevalent in the media. Among us in modern society, anti-Semitic policies are still being pursued in other countries, along with beliefs being spread on social media platforms. There is a tendency to misinterpret or mock the Holocaust, meaning misinformation spreads like wildfire.
I'm Phoenix. As an academy, we now teach a new perspective on the Holocaust, where we do not look at only the large minority groups, but rather each victim as their own person, better showing each individual experience. These new ideas are delivered to all year groups and across a multitude of subjects, including history, RE and English. As of 2022, Belfast Academy has been granted with the title of a Beacon School, meaning we are one of the leading schools in Holocaust education, proving our Academy's beliefs that Holocaust education is essential to the curriculum. This is clearly exhibited through both our annual memorial tutor programs presented to all year groups to our studies in year 8, 9 and 10. Whether we are looking into more modern literature or at a more historical point of view, the Holocaust is being taught to us in a purposeful, meaningful way where we are taught to understand the horror on a mass scale, but also to narrow down on a more personal view, to give our studies more depth into the ordinary people involved, victims and perpetrators alike, and to give us further insight on the suffering of all those millions of individual people. Together as a school, we should stay educated of these events through these wonderful new teaching methods to give students a true awareness of the Holocaust.
Thank you very much for that. Great insight into the work that you're studying in connection with this. And I think what comfort it gives to many, many people that we are still, our schools are still studying what has happened and learning from it. Thank you. I would now like to invite Evelyn Raphael, who is a local resident, to talk about her experiences during the Holocaust.
Is that okay? I'm Evelyn, and I'd like to talk to you about a different aspect of World War II and what happened to me and my family during that time. I was born on the 29th of May, 1939. Unfortunate timing for a Jewish girl in France, just 3 months before the war broke out. We lived in the northern part of France that was governed by Maréchal Pétain. He was a general who attained the position of Marshal of France at the end of the First World War and was regarded as a hero by everyone. He was Hitler's right-hand man. The whole area was crawling with dutiful German soldiers whose only purpose was to seek out Jews, put them in detention center until they could be dispatched to the death camps. The French police, and especially the French militia, were helping Germans find Jews and gave financial reward to anyone who was ready to betray a Jewish family. At the time of rationing, when people were hungry, any extra money was welcome, no matter how they obtained it. My parents soon realized that to stay in our little village of Mans, which was southeast of Paris, where everybody knew that our surname was Gratstein. They didn't say Gratstein, they said Gratstein, to make sure we understood we're not one of them. And my parents decided we just had to go, so we had to go into hiding. But how could we go, four of us, and not be discovered? First of all, we had to leave our little village, and my parents packed clothes and vital supplies, and we left our village, much the same as Ukrainians are doing at the moment. My parents soon realized that the four of us was doomed to failure if we stayed together. So they decided to split us up. My brother and I was 2, my brother was 4. We were sent to foster parents. And with the help of some social workers, they found various families from time to time who hid us. Because obviously, if anybody betrayed us and told the Germans that those families were hiding Jews, they'd have been shot. So we had to stay invisible. We could not be seen outside playing with other children, and had to go down to the cellar every time someone knocked on the door. Could have been the Gestapo. We could not go to school because our surname would have given us away. And the French militia who scrutinized schools' attendance registers to hand over any Jewish children to the German would have been sent to death for hiding us. Anyway, names like David, Adam, Joshua for boys, or Rebecca, Miriam, or Esther for girls, labeled you as a Jew, because normally Catholic children didn't have Old Testament names. So just your mere first name would give you away. My mom was a servant
in a big house at one time. She also worked as a bookkeeper and worked in a printing shop. My father was forced to do menial jobs, from shoemender to gardener in a Catholic orphanage on my land, or pretending to be nude or simpleton so that people wouldn't ask him questions. My father was Polish and obviously had an accent, so he had to be nude or pretend to be nude. We only saw our mum about 2 or 3 times a month, and we didn't see our father for 3 years. We played cat and mouse with the Gestapo all through the war, and thankfully the 4 of us survived. However, 21 members of my family were sent to Auschwitz, and only 4 of them came back alive.
Thank you very much, everyone. We now move to a younger generation again, and our youth mayor, Ayla Chowdhury Rashid, will now read the poem Never Shall I Forget by Elie Wiesel.
Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp that turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me of all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God, my soul, and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God himself. Never.
Thank you, Ellen. These formal proceedings are now drawing to a close, but before we do, I would like you to listen to the Southend Boys and Girls Choirs, who will now perform 4 short pieces of music.
Always
seek to cause division, foster strife from land to land. There is room for understanding, but there is no room for hate. We must bind ourselves together, for together we are great. Together we are great. We are all alike and different. It's not up to us.
and gentlemen, once again we've been touched by today's speaker sharing her story with us, and I would like to formally thank Janine for being with us today. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Evelyn, a local resident, for sharing her story today. Us as a city, we hold this annual commemoration in the highest esteem, and with it our shared understanding of the horrors of the Holocaust. It is important to reflect and ensure we shape a stronger future, particularly in these times of economic challenge. It is important to reflect back on a time that must never be repeated. There are no excuses for extremist behaviour to dehumanise others. And as one of England's newest cities, we hope that we can be a leading community to ensure that we understand and learn from those horrors. I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you for the preparation and delivery of today's event. These must go to Rabbi Hyman, to Rabbi Elf, to my chaplain, Father Clive Hillman. I would also like to thank the other councillors, my colleagues who are members of the Holocaust Memorial Working Day Party for their support. I would like to particularly thank Rosemary Pennington, who must be mentioned for a continued drive to develop new speakers for this event and the associated activity. I'd also like to thank our council officers who've supported us today, including Sharon Wheeler and Emma Cook for the technical support, to Tony Mayer for filming this service, and to Robert Harris. I would also like to take the opportunity to say thank you for the musical contributions from the Summers Piano Trio to Roger Humphrey and the Southend Boys and Girls Choir. I would also like to thank the students from Belfairs Academy for their presentation and for the poetry reading given to us by the youth mayor. And finally, I would like to invite you all to join me in refreshments which are available in the foyer outside the council chamber, and which will also give us the opportunity to view the exhibitions which are on display there. Thank you very much for attending today.